See, Julie, Rhamph is instant cheat code to make anybody trust you. You just hop on a lily pad and everyone's like, oh my god, it's contained! Hello. So, I've got a lot to go over today for this, but first I want to talk about the dev blog. Because, I won't lie, it had me pretty excited for what's to come for this year. First is ripping off the band-aid for why the first major update of 2026 might be delayed. People get ill, people have holidays. It is what it is. All you can do is wish them a speedy recovery, but otherwise, there's nothing that can change that because life is life. Along with then an engine upgrade sometime this year, which makes the game more accessible to anybody with the lower end devices. More accessibility to more players. How can you go wrong? But next up then we have hiring and expanding the team. Well, it's funny that the main thing they actually mentioned here was Dino AI. You know, getting a programmer for that, and that's been like one of the big, driving points that a lot of players are desperate for, or really, really excited for. So, getting a dedicated programmer for that specific part, I'm pretty excited for that. I can't wait. Another exciting part for all of the Pandurians and Gondwanians that did not want to go through the effort of, well, growing all their dinos again on the new map Riparia. Have a little bit of patience, and soon, you won't have to. I'm personally not bothered by having to grow again on a new map, but hey, if someone doesn't want to, now this gives them more accessibility to play on different maps. Sounds like good news to me. But here's the real big ticket item right here, matchmaking improvements. And I'm gonna actually give this a good read. We plan on making official server matchmaking improvements which are targeting adding a dedicated solo mode to the game and reducing mega packing outside of the group slot limits for players that want that to be an option. I had hoped to get this done in the time for the Riparia release, however, did not have the time to make the patch submission cycle. We look forward to rolling that out in 2026 as the team catches up from being on holiday. I will also be running more stress tests on the game for 200 player servers to collect data for our team to make more optimizations so that we can reach our gold standard for server capacity. The previous stress tests have been extremely helpful, and we've already made many changes and fixes to the game to improve server performance in a meaningful way. Now, this is the main ticket item that I'm really excited about. I mean, I've been kind of just talking about her in almost every video for the last couple of months. If you go back through a bunch of my videos, I've just been mindlessly droning on about matchmaking. Just because I just really want it. I can't lie, I just really want it. I enjoy the case of people putting groups together that actually fit that 12 slot limit. Though I won't lie, I will kind of miss having the Mega Slop versus Mega Slop wars that I used to do a lot in the past. But then again, if we end up getting game modes anytime soon, that's where a lot of it'll be. And last off, the final thoughts, I truly believe we have entered the golden era of Path of Titans, and we have some amazing things planned for 2026. More dinosaur TLCs, new creatures, improvements to the quest system, and more. We plan on covering a lot of this in the future dev blogs to give you a bit more of a breakdown on everything planned. Thanks again for your support as we continue improving Path of Titans. We remain absolutely committed to delivering all the features planned for 2026 and everything we promised during our crowdfunding campaign. Thanks to everyone who has purchased the game, gifted the game, and purchased skin packs to support development. See you in game, Matt. But where's the blue moss? Matt! Why didn't you mention blue moss? Why? I honestly just don't understand how you expect me to get excited with no blue moss. But jokes aside, I mean, it's a lot to expect for 2026, and it's a lot of good news that, for what they plan to bring for this year. I mean, they ended up laying so many foundations for new systems in 2025, and now, that's given them a lot of space in which they can build onto for this year. And all I can say is I'm excited for what they actually do for 2026. But either way, there's a lot to go over with today's video. As you probably read in the title and thumbnail, Rhamph Swarm has hit Riparia. And unlike everything else in Riparia, Rhamph is eating good. But, with all that out of the way, I hope you all enjoy. So we're going to have a lot to go over for this little escapade, so why don't we go over who we have with us? So we have Julie, Ryder, Goldfish, Aston, the Imp of Riparia, Left on a Sour Note, Arrow Arts, and lastly, me. And so that's 8 Rhamphs ready to cause problems for anything we come across, so far. And of course, the first order of business is just grouping up with everybody so we're all on the same page of where we're going to start. But in this case, this server was also pretty much just really close to its end, and so we end up, trying to find a spot to quickly log out and change server. Which is where we came across our first funny little interaction, which was a Urinosaurus jumping up onto the little rock cliff edge, whatever you want to call it, pretty much just to say hi to us.
Pike him!
Me and Arrow sat on them for around a minute before they decided to hop back in the water, while everyone else was searching for a server. And it was just a funny little chase sequence throughout these tunnels until I found a little air pocket.
There's an air pocket over here, Arrow.
And so we move on to the next server, group up, and here is where we end up spotting a Spino. We end up pouncing that and plaguing it for a little bit, at least until it ends up jumping into the water, in which, well, what can you do? It's a semi-aquatic, and Rhamph cannot pounce things that are already underwater. But alas, we move on, and so we fly north from Wollemi Forest over into East Passage, where 2 Achillobators have been spotted over by the Waystone. And at first, it started off decently well for these 2 Achillos, since they were only actually seeing maybe 1 or 2 Rhamphs trying to pounce them at the time. And with that, they were able to just bite the Rhamph off of each other. But as more of us started to roll in, that calm nature that they first showed started to dissipate a little bit as they heard the overlapping sounds of laughing birds. The point of there being so many Rhamphs is that when one Achillobator tried to bite Rhamphs off of the other one, then that one would then also get pounced, forcing pretty much a back and forth of friendly fire between each other. And alongside that, with this many Rhamphs, the amount of plague stacks would always be maxed between the both of them. The only thing we'll really need to worry about is making sure that we don't die and end up feeding them. Even for an Achillobator, which doesn't generally need that much food, finding enough critters to sustain 5 times food drain between 2 Achillobators constantly is harder than you would have thought. And so that was pretty scary taking all that damage, but like an idiot, I ended up trying to actually get another pounce to try and heal. And you see where that got me right there. Surviving right there was just pure luck. And so this carried on for maybe another minute until I noticed that one of them had split off from the other.
Running to the cave, is he?
Now at first I thought they were going to try and run to the cave, because that's just the most common thing you end up seeing whenever you play Rhamph. You plague someone and they'll try and get to the cave, but instead for this Achillobator, they actually just ran south towards the river in order to try and get some water. I think maybe if they stayed together instead of splitting up, this would have been easier for them to actually get water, because just as they've split up, so have we, and we've got enough people to, keep both of these Achillobators busy.
He's trying to log. Oh no. Why y'all want to kill me?
Anything can end the life of another playable, so why not Rhamphs? But after the orange Achillobator came back from their water run, they eventually started finally doing what I was expecting them to do, which was to run towards the cave. But let's not forget that Rhamph is also able to start combat timers, not precisely by dealing damage, but just colliding with other playables. And just outside of the home cave is where we ended up getting our first casualties. That is a little bit worrying that they have bought themselves a good amount of time in which they've got 2 Rhamphs that they can just eat right off the bat. But I still feel a little bit confident in being able to keep this Achillobator in combat and keep them starving. At least until someone else from the other half of the group show up in order to keep this one busy. As we can just take turns, plaguing, pouncing, keeping them in combat, until a funny thing happens. I end up actually getting the home cave debuff, but so does this Achillo, to the point where they end up actually needing to, well, run away from the cave. But as for me, I decided to go over to the other Achillobator as Julie had ended up calling out that a Latin Venatrix had shown up to help them. But all that sounds like to me is another avenue for them to get more friendly fire on each other. But there is a concerning thing about this Latin.
Yeah, it's using raptor strikes. Yeah.
Now, the only pain for Rhamphs in terms of this situation with a Latin having Raptor Strikes is that Raptor Strikes is never going to kill you. Same for Achillobator. Especially with the case that, hey, it's got to ramp up the damage and Latin is already small. You get where I'm coming from. And so you're actually technically in more danger if something can't one-shot you, but can also attack very fast. Because before you even know it, they're just hitting you, and you're below your lucky feather threshold, and they're ramped up on damage, so they're definitely just gonna kill you
Orange
outright.
one is rushing towards cave.
Yeah, so this Achillobator is rushing towards the cave, and they're actually taking their time, trying not to just rush and sprint in a straight line, in order to dodge the ramps that are trying to dart into them, like this right here. All it takes is one collision, and they're back at our mercy. Or, well, they're gonna be anyway. But another funny little thing happened right here. A fresh juvie Allo just left the home cave, and is still on invulnerability buff. Is Achillo, starving, desperate. Is just... yeah, they're trying to get this Allo. They are that desperate. And I don't even blame them. I really don't. But we have Rhamphs on the side of this Achillo, and each time that this Latin tries to bite the Rhamphs off, it's just getting this Achillo lower and lower. And you know what's eventually going to happen. Now, imagine being this baby Sarko right here. You just left the cave, you're juvie, you got all the hope in the world, and the first thing you see is this, just a fresh meal. Living the Riparian dream right there. But alas, we are not done yet. And so we move on to the next Achillobator, in which they decided to maybe take their chances, maybe along the coast. As they know that no amount of attempts of entering the home cave are really going to work. And so this continued on for maybe another 3 minutes of just plaguing, until they eventually ended up just standing still, contemplating what they had done to deserve this, in which they'd done nothing. This was all just the whims of people who enjoy playing Rhamphorinchus. Though there was one last second wind of resistance, all while two little baby Sarkos are running along the kelp piles, enjoying the show. And eventually, the Achillo, overcome with the amount of starvation, jumps into the water and promptly starves out. This all ended up taking around 12 minutes from start to finish of meeting the Achillos till, well, feeding the only witnesses of the end of it. Which was, of course, these baby Sarkos.
Yeah, the baby Sarko got fed.
And so next we spread out in order to find our next target. And that was until Goldfish ended up calling out that there was something interesting back over in Coastland Swamps, in which she ended up spotting an Eo. And of course, as soon as I got there, I immediately hopped on. Now, for Riparia, it seems like it's a lot harder for, herbivores to actually stay fed than they did on Gondor. And that's probably because there's not just 9 berry bushes in every single POI, unlike Gondor, right?
They're saying Grand Plains where there's just infinite berry bushes this time.
Yeah, not infinite berry bushes, but there was at least one berry bush very, very close by, which they spotted and started eating immediately. And as they start eating, a random Spino shows up, and pretty much is just, well, you know what's going to happen. The Spino's going to start attacking the Eo, while pretty much all the Rhamphs are just depleting that berry bush right there. Just in case the Eo ends up winning the fight. But you know how it is. Spinos are very, very strong, and Eo is kind of struggling amongst Apexes right now. And so after the Eo was dead, Spino let out his victory roar, started eating, and we ended up just pouncing it until it eventually ran off into the water. In which, after that, we promptly went and just picked apart this body clean. To me, this just actually looks really cool at 8 times speed. But next up, we all ended up flying over to Mudflats, as one of us had spotted a duck and was already in the process of plaguing it. And so we all flew over, trying to pounce it, collide with it, to put it in combat to stop from logging out. But it seems that this duck has actually just quick-logged, ignoring the timer and risking, you know, the case that something may see them being AFK and just kill them on the spot. And needless to say, they did manage to actually pull a good old Houdini on us by just disappearing on the spot. But that wasn't the interesting part of this interaction. What was interesting was the Hatze that came in to try and attack us right afterwards. And so, you know what's got to be done. It's got to be pretty much locked to the floor and plagued to death. But the best part of this interaction is that they came to us, we did not go to them, because usually a Rhamph will never be able to catch it if it just flies in a straight line at top speed. And so the best way to negate that, in order for them not to get away, is to just keep it pounced at all times. All we need is a little bit of communication and telling each other when we're about to hop off of the Hatze for another Rhamph to take our place.
Wait. Okay, I'm about to hop off now.
But that's not the only thing that was kind of funny and interesting about this interaction. Do you remember the 2 Achillos we starved out earlier? And that there was a baby Sarco at the time that was watching the entire thing? Well, they came back, and they seem eager to get involved in attacking the Hatze. The only worry for me at the time is that if this baby Sarco dies, it adds a bit of time to how long this is going to take.
No, baby Sarco, no!
Though fortunately, they were able to just make it back to the water, just in time for the random Spino that attacked the Eo earlier to show up again. And I can only imagine how helpless this situation feels for this Hatze right here. This was way more than one would have bargained for.
I got it. You're gonna die, Hatze! Alright, I'm gonna hop off now. Oh, this is what I call true coordination right now.
Yeah, this was quite a marvel to me. Just seeing the amount, a good amount of coordination and communication, just telling each other when we're going to hop off. Though I won't lie, my stomach did drop a bit as soon as I saw the Hatze flying.
I'm seeing death
but
scars,
fortunately, the amount of running and pecking without actually landing any attacks that this Hatze have done, they haven't really got the stamina to get very far.
Sarco cheering us on. Alright, I'm hopping off now.
Yeah, that was kind of funny to me. It's like earlier with the Achillos, when the last one ended up jumping into the water and dying, then the same guy ended up saying, "I appreciate the meal, Rhamphs," and, it was just a funny little interaction, and they got involved themselves, or at least they tried to get involved as much as they could. But this whole interaction is starting to come to a little bit of a close, as this Hatze has been taking starvation damage for a decent while. And the only other audience members we have to this little escapade are 2 little Urinos sitting in the river. That's at least until the baby Sarco ends up showing up again for round 2.
Mate, the baby Sarco is the MVP!
Definitely the most important part of this entire little interaction here was just this baby Sarco who just didn't care if they messed up enough and died. Though this Hatze did end up getting quite a good amount of pecks, earning them quite a lot of stamina, in which they ran along the beach and popped like popcorn. I'll say it again, the 2 baby Sarcos, they were the real MVPs here. But alas, we must leave to find our next targets to bother. In which we first stopped over at Twisted Forest to get a quick little drink, before we eventually came across a Concavenator. And I gotta say that, this Concavenator did not react whatsoever. So, we just sat on its side, it didn't buck, it didn't try to bite us off, it didn't do anything. It did the perfect thing to get the heat off of itself, which was just to ignore the Rhamphs. I've said this before, that is the perfect counter to any person who's trying to plague you. Ignore them. They will get bored, and they will leave you alone. Because, funny enough, Concavenator is actually very, very good at defending itself against Rhamphs in the first place. It just has, you know, a small enough body that a lot of its attacks can actually hit stuff that is pounced to its side. But after around 2 minutes of plaguing this conch and it just not reacting, we decided to let it go, as Julie had called out that there was a Rex that we could plague over in Dryfang Canyon. And along with that, there was also another Rhamph who ended up joining the swarm due to hearing about it in global chat. But eventually, we arrived to the Rex, and it was a bit smaller than I was expecting at first, and their main priority right now is kind of just reaching the cave. I'm also imagining the cinematic horror of being bothered by this little bird that is slowly whittling you away via starvation, while then also hearing laughter in the distance of more of these tiny little birds. But either way, we're pretty much doing what we've done before, just taking it in turns, plaguing this Rex, and every time that it tries to run to the cave, we put it in combat so that it can't just enter the cave and get out of this problem situation. Until eventually it just stands still, and it just quick logs, ignoring the logout timer. And sadly, even though we could see death scars, it does disappear right before our eyes.
Damn. Oh, mate.
And so it's just time to look for another target, in which, as soon as we end up flying down south, we end up spotting 2 juvie allos. I know I'm gonna get some funny comments from this one. And so you know how this goes. We pounce the allos, preferably the bigger allo of the 2, because if then the smaller one is trying to bite you off, it's dealing less damage, and funnily enough, it's low enough damage that you can just out-heal it. But eventually, they ended up running over to a Hatze, in which we found out later was just, you know, a friend that was sticking around to help them grow. But their main focus right now is actually just to get towards the home cave, because, well, I can't blame them for wanting to get over to the home cave. It's kind of just a surefire way to avoid everything in the game. But that was not our only surprise to come. We actually ended up coming across quite a lot of Hatze in the area, and we may have stumbled across another large group. And all of the Hatze that we're about to see are all built full air Hatze, so they are the best thing for trying to deal with Rhamphs. Because, look, I'm just actually going to go on a little side tangent here. Do you remember old Hatze, and you used to see those people who got really, really good at using flail and barrel roll to get hits on Hatze? All that practice and all that time people spent at getting good at Hatze before with air combat, and then they just made it all into AoE. It's just a little side thing, you know, all that effort kind of wasted by just making it all AoE for Hatze. That's just a little side thought that was going on in the back of my head since before the Riparia release. But either way, the 2 allos, they use the chaos of the, you know, Hatze showing up to attack all the Rhamphs as an opportunity to try and get some distance and get to the cave. In which, obviously, we can see that there's a couple of us who are taking advantage of them being separated from the Hatze in order to get some more plague done. But all we're doing is just concentrating on trying to keep them in combat, and, well, along with plague, alongside that. But for a funny detail in this, as we're plaguing these 2 allos, there's an Allo that ends up leaving the cave, looking for about 2 seconds, and then heading right back in.
Well, yeah,
But then, the Hatze shows up and hits me with flail, forcing me to go and heal and get out of this situation right here. And while I'm off healing to try and just get myself back into lucky feather range, some of us are losing our lucky feathers due to the AoE, chained and picked off. And sadly for us, the 2 allos did manage to actually make it into the cave safely thanks to the distraction of the Hatze. Damn AoE. Either way, never forget that you can just dodge the AoE from Hatze by using a pounce, as it only hits anything that is considered flying. And if you hit pounce, you are no longer considered flying. So with one last little goodbye to this Hatze, I fly off with everybody else as we've pretty much called it off from this area. Not without a bit of trash talk from the other end, because you know how it goes, global be globaling. But either way, we end up flying over to Big Tree Overlook, and we end up finding a Rex and an Allo. And I'm imagining their perspective right now. First, it was one Rhamph. Then, another Rhamph shows up. And then, before they know it, there's an entire swarm laughing at them from the air. And so it just starts off with simple things like enticing them to come up to this cliff, in which this Allo then jumps off and takes a ton of fall damage. Pouncing both the Rex and Allo at the same time, pushing them to actually do some friendly fire to each other. Activating Rat Out on them to force them to start screaming, in which that could be a funny situation of just luring over other people. But I think this Rex was already pretty low food before he even ended up arriving, because after around 2 minutes or maybe 3 minutes of plaguing, along with a bunch of friendly fire from the Allo, it was already pretty much at early death scars, which wasn't helped by the Allo continuing to try and bite Rhamphs off of its side. I get it, though. You know, if they don't, well, the Rhamphs just starve them even further. If they do, they bring this Rex just ever closer to death. Even going through the effort of trying to separate from the Allo a little bit, just so they don't take so much friendly fire. Though that is at least until the Allo starts getting enough attention from enough of us that pretty much the Rex ends up coming back and dealing their own level of friendly fire. But then after that, I think the Rex just knew what was going to happen, and decided to just kind of make some distance from the Allo in hope that it would drag some of the Rhamphs away from it, in which it ran towards the water and died just right next to it. But alas, our work was still not yet done, as we had an entire Allo to starve out. Now, here's an interesting thing to me. The Rex had just died. That's an entire Rex's worth of meat in order to, to feed this Allo, along with a pond that's drinkable right next to it. I don't understand why the Allo decided to actually start running away from the area, instead of just, prolonging, how long they'd be able to live by eating this Rex body and drinking the water. My thought is it at least buys you enough time in order that you may be able to actually kill some Rhamphs. That's just the thought, or at least just pop a bunch of their feathers, in which that buys you time just in itself. As when you end up popping lucky feathers on a bunch of Rhamphs, then they're a lot more hesitant to actually try anything, because if they make one mistake then, they end up dying. But as I said, this is not what this Allo chose. Instead, they chose to run away from the area and away from the body and water, and pretty much just got slowly starved out, as you can see from the death scars on its body. And so you know how this is going to go. This Allo is running along, trying to get away from the cloud of Rhamphs behind it, with at least one Rhamph on its side at all times, until, well, it eventually ends up dying. I guess the weird part about this is that the people from Dryfang Canyon, the two hats that started trash talking, they're still going off at us. Yeah, I mean, globals be globaling. But either way, we end up making our way over to Cedrus Forest, as one of us have actually found a Tyrannotitan and a Metri. And as usual, we get to work with plaguing, pouncing both the Metri and the Tyrannotitan. And funny thing is here that the Tyrannotitan just blatantly bites the Metri to get the Rhamphs off it, which adds a bunch of bleed to the Metri, in which now they can't use their healing call for a while until the bleed drops off. But also, funnily enough here, we had a little audience member, a Styraco that I'm guessing was just not a fan of seeing a Tyrannotitan with a Metri. And with this situation, as soon as they ended up spotting the Styrac, they immediately started dashing over, in which, well, a Styrac isn't going to take too kindly to that. And so, the Styrac ends up running away, and the Tyranno ends up chasing. And this is an amazing distraction for us, because instead of the Tyrannotitan concentrating on trying to bite Rhamphs off of the Metri, or trying to bite the Rhamphs that end up dismounting it, instead, we can just hop off very safely.
Dear lord, mate.
But before long, maybe about 3 minutes since this ended up starting, both the Tyrannotitan and the Metri start to walk towards the ocean. Never without spending a second, though, not having a Rhamph on their side. And every time that both of these two try to get a Rhamph off of the other, they end up just dealing more and more friendly fire damage. In which, to a Rhamph, any amount of friendly fire damage is pretty much akin to doing our job for us, as we can't do damage in the first place. So we'll take all the help we can get. But now, look at the state of this Metri. This is, like, very, very heavy death scars. And as you just saw right there, they just killed one of us. I'm guessing the mindset right here is kind of just deal as much damage as you can before you go out. But whatever you do, do not stay near that water, as there's a pretty scary little surprise hiding in there. Weirdly, Tylo is one of the rare things that are big that can actually just kill a Rhamph decently reliably. But either way, the Metri starved out.
It died anyway!
And since this one was such a quick clip, I decided to just hop in the water with the Tylo, in which they were very quick to get my lucky feather. Before then enjoying a nice little group huddle with a bunch of people from the swarm. And here's a warning, don't worry, Rhamphs just do that every now and then. But nevertheless, we must go out and find yet another target. And so we spread out, checking multiple different areas, until we ended up finding ourselves right back off where we started, which was in Cedrus Forest, thanks to one of us finding a Rex, which started off with maybe about 3 or 4 Rhamphs as a starter course.
Yeah, it can grab you. Oh. Sorry, that's how I took that spot.
But as more of the swarm started to show up, this Rex was looking for a better spot to try and defend themselves. So they ran over to this little rock formation. I don't know what you'd call it. But sadly for them, it wasn't really that effective against this amount of Rhamphs, as we can pretty much just jump onto their side from above, and then as soon as we need to actually hop off, there is plenty of spaces on top of this rock in which this Rex cannot get to for us to safely get stamina.
You're having fun.
But then again, you could say that about any part of the map, really. It's Rhamph. But once they noticed that it wasn't really the best spot for them, they started to rush towards the small pond in the middle of Cedrus Forest in order to get a drink. And the wonderful thing right here, for us, is that every second that they spend drinking is time spent being plagued and having their food decreased. And it pushes them to make a decision of either drinking or trying to deal with the flying rats around them. Either decision is fine for us. Either they start drinking and give us time to do what we enjoy doing, or they try to deal with us and stop doing what they need. The only thing that could be a little bit of a pain is the abundance of critters over in Cedrus Forest. There are so many critters, in which we end up having to try and pick apart the bodies before they can actually get a good amount of food. And after a while, they did start moving in a direction, though it didn't really have a clear goal. I think it was more like just trying to find a better position in order to try and defend themselves against these Rhamphs. And I think a funny little side plot thing right here is just the random Meg that was in the area, just watching this Rex on the hill, just slowly struggling, and is just kind of almost begging, please help. But then the Meg is just like, nah, you're on your own, buddy. And since they weren't able to get any help from the Meg, the Rex decided to hobble their way over towards the river. And in the river, there was actually a Tylo that we were able to spot due to the fact of Plague allowing you to see things that are in water. That's something I hope gets fixed. And as for the Rex, they do decide to maybe try and risk taking help from this Tylo, in which the Tylo does try to actually help. The problem is that Tylo does a lot of damage to the Rex. And the problem for this Tylo in trying to help the Rex is that each bite doesn't deal that much damage per hit to Rhamphs. They would need to actually use something like Bone Snap or Headbutt, but then, if they hit the Rex, that's even more damage. In the end, I would say that this Tylo actually did more damage to the Rex than we did with Starvation.
Rex dead.
And so here we are at the end. So, for anybody who's made it this far, how have you been? As you can see, I've had a lot of fun on this map lately, and it's kind of gotten in the way with actually just making videos just because I've been having too much fun with actually, I don't know, playing the game, right? So, when I end up, you know, thinking, ooh yeah, maybe I should go make a video, I think, ooh, I could go make a video, or I could just play the game. Which, I can't lie, has been very, very, very refreshing for me. I mean, I even ended up going out my way to grow my first 5 slot the other day for Riparia, which was actually a nightmare. It was a Rex, and honestly, I have never seen as many alpha critters as on any of the maps where I've grown them as I have on Riparia trying to grow this Rex. It was actually ridiculous. I think I died like maybe 4 times to just alpha critters. It was kind of funny. I couldn't even be mad because I was just trying to be dumb with it and tried to just face tank them. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with what I read in the dev blog, and well, it's something that can make me pretty excited for 2026. And I won't lie, I'm kind of hoping that we possibly see game modes this year as well, even if just some more tests. I really, really enjoyed the game mode tests in the past. But let me think, is there anything else for me to add on to the end of this video? Not really. So, you've practically listened to me yap for 37 minutes, and with all that out of the way, I hope you've all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye.